The Free Lunch is a 2001 science fiction novel by Canadian-American novelist Spider Robinson. The title comes from, at least the title was popularized by Robert A. Heinlein, with the phrase, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. The idea being apparently back in like the Depression era and stuff like that, they would offer a free lunch along with your drinks. However, the drinks were that with your drinks. However, the drinks were a lot more expensive, and they're also, apparently salty or gross or whatever to kind of make you want to eat. So it's the whole idea that you can't get anything for free. So in this book, Mike, the main character, 12-year-old boy, sneaks into Dreamland, an amazing amusement park. Quite amazing for the fact that it's actually a very kind-hearted, happy place. Everyone is always happy there. Sort of Disney, but less corporate. Definitely much more less corporate in that the Dreamland features seem to be populated suspiciously by what I know that someone like Spider Robinson would love. Like there's a strawberry fields, actual strawberries fields there from Strawberry Fields Forever by John Lennon, and also Robert A. Heinlein. I think there's a Podcane of Mars section. So it's definitely, I get the sense this is Spider Robinson's. This is his dream best place you would want to sneak into and live. And indeed, that's what 12-year-old Mike does. Now, he's apparently tried this a bunch of other times and just got ejected immediately. This is the year 2023, and there's lots of security. He's had to put a fake limb out to get the armband on so he can shuck it off, and then try and just basically to try and figure everything out. Luckily, this time he runs into Annie, who is a older woman, a small person midget. I'm gonna go with small person, who has also been living underground in the thing, off the grid. Nobody else knows that she's there. She's hidden behind. She's hidden in this is an immense place like Disneyland size, and she's managed to kind of make herself a niche in the system. And indeed, she helps so much. She helps out so much. She kind of earns her keep, making sure that Dreamland keeps operational. That the workers there who are like, we think there's something there. It's like an urban legend. They call her the Mother Elf. The Mother Elf. And so, yeah, so it's a very appealing thing right off the bat, I have to say, with that kind of premise, the idea of living behind the scenes of something like a giant amusement park and getting to see how everything works. This is very much, it's interesting. The book talks about at the very beginning, and he's like, look, have you ever gone up to a magician after a show and asked how the trick has worked? And those times that when they tell you how the trick worked, how they did it, did that disappoint you? And Mike's like, no, that made it even better, because wow, they were able to use just mundane means to make something appear magical. And he thought that was amazing, which in some ways I look at it as, that's how I look at, in some ways how I look at how I like to kind of pull apart fiction, is because when I can kind of pull apart and try and figure out how it works, how the magic works, I find that doesn't make it less magical to me. That makes it more magical. It's like, holy crap, the amount of skill and craft and everything that went into making this wonderful feeling. I listened to this on audiobook, and it was narrated by Spider Robinson. And I know that some people's like, oh, it's terrible when authors who aren't, trained actors, declaim their own works. Spider Robinson is a really good reader of his own work. And actually, he's a really good reader of other people's works. He mentions at the beginning of this book that he and John Varley both came up with this kind of the idea for this story together, and Varley he sort of drifted off. Apparently it's like, it's your idea, you just go do it, after about 17 years. So then Spider Robinson's like, well, I love the guy. But Spider Robinson has read a couple of John Varley's early stories, and John Varley's early stories are quite amazing, and he does a beautiful reading of them. And I would highly recommend you just go and check those out. Spider on the Web, I think, still has them. If they are still there, that would be wonderful. I haven't actually checked. I'll take a look. I probably saved the actual MP3 files onto my computer somewhere so I could keep them always, because he just does such a great job. And indeed, he does a great job of reading his own work. And his own work is really good in the senses of, I really like the characters of Mike and Annie. They're smart, intelligent people. That's a part of the reason why they're there, is that, you know, these aren't just like kind of wish fulfillment, dumb characters who are like, you know, bought into some kind of Disneyland. Oh, everything is happy. It's like, no, they're flawed, damaged, really super smart people. Sometimes you know, I don't know if they get along a little too well sometimes, and like, you know, they laugh a little too easily to each other after even just knowing each other the time they do. But that's, I think, one of the appeals of Spider Robinson's work, is that he gets such a comfortable feeling with his characters. Sometimes he can slip over into what I think is sentimentality. I don't really like his Callahan books, which, strangely enough, I guess at the time of him, when he was writing them in the 80s and stuff like that, that's his super most popular thing. I don't know how well those are going to age. I don't know how well they've aged and how well people outside of his generation like them. There's a lot more of his, he's the groovy hippie grandpa. And if you're not really into the groovy hippie grandpa stuff, that can, I think sometimes, and me as maybe a cynical, hard-hearted Gen Xer, some of that stuff can be a little bit hard to handle, and just the sentimentality kind of gets at you. I actually like it when he gets a little bit more the dark side. He's got he's got like a trilogy, the Death Killer trilogy, and the very bad deaths, very bad choices stuff, which are very dark books. They have really strong villains in them, I think, which probably counteracts sentimentality. And it's also, he's very good at kind of constructing these kind of steel trap scenarios where you feel the heroes having to kind of work their way out from them. Now, for the free lunch, it's funny because it's like, yeah, we get the kind of the setup. Here's Mike introduced into this new world, Dreamland. We don't get a lot before suddenly the plot kicks in. And at first you think, oh, the plot's going to be this. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm relieved that it wasn't that particular complication. But then it goes from, you know, what you might expect would be the one complication in a science fiction novel to the other kind of most used trope of certain kinds of science fiction novels. And I think I would have actually been happier if we had how do I do this without spoiling it? I wish we had just probably focused more on the villains of the piece versus introducing these other characters who come from a different place into the piece. Into the piece. And I think that would have been more satisfying. I felt that felt a little bit on the gimmicky side and didn't really push Mike and Annie as far as it could have gone. It became much more plot driven, and it would have been much more as a character study. I would have been more interested in hearing more about. So this is Dreamland is built by Thomas Omega, and he has a rival who basically, it's like Thrill Land or something like that, which is just super violent and gory, and that's really looked down upon in this novel as like a bad thing, even though I do think about like horror fans and things like that, and like, no, there's a thing of there's a value of kind of exploring darkness in entertainment. And I mean, this book itself has some pretty dark, gruesome scenes in it. And so it was interesting having the two opposing things of having kind of this light, happy dreamland, and then having this very dark thrill world. And indeed, in some ways, this is almost set up to be, there could be a sequel in here with Thrill World. I think it's Thrill World getting more into it with the villain who, I have to say, actually, he is much more mustache twirling villain than actually his henchman. His henchman, Conway, I believe it is, a name that I have reason to remember, is actually more interesting in that he's very much kind of like the sociopathic, cold, I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to really test you heroes and kind of all that stuff. So yeah, the free lunch, I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the Dreamland scenario of being behind the scenes. The plot as it is, not so much. Not so much. I have a feeling this was the idea that was generated between him and Varley, and so that was what stuck. That was the reason for it. But I found I liked the stuff around it much more, and of course, I just super enjoyed having Spider read to me. So yeah, that is my review of The Free Lunch by Spider Robinson. More videos later.